You'd think growing up in a big house with a fancy chandelier and velvet curtains would feel like a dream. But for me, Ella, it felt more like a trap. The attic was my only space, crammed with old furniture, boxes of junk, and just enough room for a small bed. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Most nights, I'd sit by the little window, sketching dresses in my worn-out notebook. Drawing was the only thing that made me feel alive. I'd imagine elegant ball gowns with glittering fabrics, dresses that could make anyone feel like royalty. But that was just a dream, one I couldn't say out loud. If Victoria or Gloria ever caught me, they'd laugh until their faces hurt. "Ella!" Gloria's sharp voice rang out, snapping me from my thoughts. "What are you doing up there? The guests are waiting." I quickly shoved my sketchbook under a loose floorboard, brushing dust off my hands. "Coming," I called, trying to sound cheerful. Though my heart sank, the living room was packed with Victoria's friends, all draped in designer outfits and fake smiles. They perched on the plush couches, sipping drinks, and giggling about things I couldn't care less about. I carried in a tray of snacks, careful not to trip. "Oh, look who finally decided to show up," Victoria said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. She was sprawled on the couch like she owned the place, her blonde hair perfectly styled. "Don't drop the tray, Ella. That would be embarrassing, for you, I mean." Her friends laughed on cue, like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. I clenched my jaw, but said nothing. "Ella, stop standing there like a statue," Gloria snapped from her armchair. "The bathroom isn't going to clean itself, is it? And don't forget to iron Victoria's dresses. She has an important brunch tomorrow." "Yes, Gloria," I murmured, my face burning with humiliation. Later that night, I finally dragged myself back to the attic, exhausted. My arms ached from scrubbing floors and ironing dresses, but I didn't care. All I wanted was to grab my sketchbook and escape for a while. I opened it to a half-finished design of a ball gown, complete with delicate beading and a flowing skirt. In my mind, I could see it shimmering under the light, worn by someone confident and free. Victoria's voice echoed in my head. "You're so delusional, Ella. Stick to scrubbing floors. That's all you're good for." But no matter how much they mocked me, I couldn't let go of my dream. Maybe it was foolish, but sketching dresses reminded me that there could be more to life than this. As I sketched by the dim light of a single bulb, I made myself a promise. Someday, I'd find a way out of this life. I'd prove to myself and to them that I was worth more than a servant in my own home. For now, though, I just had to survive. The city was buzzing with excitement. Every socialite, influencer, and wannabe elite had their eyes on one event, the Carlton Masquerade Ball. Hosted by James Carlton, the youngest billionaire in town and the face of half the luxury brands you could think of. It was the kind of party people would sell their souls to attend. Victoria waltzed into the living room, clutching the gold-embossed invitation like it was a crown. "The Carlton Masquerade Ball?" she squealed, holding it up for Gloria to see. "This is it, Mother. This is where James Carlton falls madly in love with me." Gloria, lounging on the couch with her ever-present glass of wine, smirked. "He's certainly looking for someone of our stature. You'll be perfect, darling." I stood silently in the corner, clutching a duster. My heart raced at the thought of the ball, the idea of walking into a grand hall, dressed in one of my own designs, surrounded by music and laughter. It was the kind of dream I'd been sketching for years. But Victoria's voice snapped me back to reality. "Don't get any ideas, Ella," she sneered, catching the look on my face. "You're not going anywhere near the ball. Someone has to stay here and clean up after us." "I wasn't thinking," I began, but Victoria cut me off. "Oh, please, like anyone would want to see you in a ball gown." Her laughter rang out, sharp and cruel. "Maybe as the help, you'd fit right in carrying trays." Gloria chuckled, sipping her wine. "Victoria's right. Don't waste your time dreaming, Ella. It's unbecoming." The next few days were a whirlwind of work. Well, for me at least. Victoria had made it her mission to look flawless for the ball, and I was her personal servant. "Make sure the sequins on my dress are perfect," she snapped, tossing the gown at me. Not a single thread out of place. "Yes, Victoria," I mumbled, carefully inspecting the fabric. "And these shoes need polishing. They're scuffed from that awful pavement downtown," she added, pushing a pair of heels into my hands. "Of course." "Oh, and my hair," she continued, running a hand through her curls. "You'll need to style it the night of the ball. something glamorous but not too overdone. We want James to think I'm effortlessly stunning. I nodded, biting my tongue. It took everything I had not to snap back at her, to tell her how exhausting it was to live as her shadow. But I didn't. As I worked late into the night, hemming Victoria's dress and polishing her shoes, I let my mind wander. What if just once I could step into a world where I wasn't just the help, where I could be seen, not for what I could do for others, but for who I was? But as the hours ticked by, the reality sank in. Dreams were just that, dreams. And my job was to make sure Victoria's night was perfect, even if it meant losing a little more of myself in the process. The night of the Carlton Masquerade Ball had arrived. The house buzzed with chaos as Victoria fluttered around in her gown, barking orders at me. I worked tirelessly to make sure every detail was perfect. Her hair, her dress, even the clasp on her necklace. All the while, I pushed down the ache in my chest, knowing I wasn't supposed to be part of that glittering world. As Victoria and Gloria swept out the door in a cloud of perfume and self-importance, I slumped into a chair, exhausted. The house was silent now, save for the ticking of the old clock in the hallway. "Why don't you go?" I turned to see Mrs. Finch, our elderly neighbor, standing in the doorway with a twinkle in her eye. She had slipped in through the back door, as she often did to bring me scraps of kindness. "Go where?" I asked, though the answer was clear. "To the ball," she said, her voice gentle but firm. I let out a bitter laugh. "Mrs. Finch, I don't even have a dress, let alone an invitation." Her smile widened. "That's where you're wrong, my dear." Mrs. Finch led me to her house, where she revealed an old gown tucked away in her attic. It wasn't new, but it was beautiful, a soft blue fabric that shimmered like moonlight. Together, we worked to bring it back to life. I hemmed the skirt, and she showed me how to polish the beads until they sparkled. "And for your mask," she said, pulling out a delicate piece of lace she had saved from her wedding veil. With a few stitches, we turned it into the perfect disguise. As I slipped into the dress and tied the mask over my face, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. For the first time in years, I felt alive. "You look like a dream," Mrs. Finch said, her eyes glistening with pride. "But how will I get there?" I asked, worry creeping into my voice. She handed me a pair of shoes, simple but elegant, and whispered, "Leave that to me." At the ball, the Carlton estate was bathed in golden light. The grand ballroom glittered with chandeliers, and the air hummed with music and laughter. I stepped inside, my heart pounding in my chest. No one recognized me, which was exactly the point. As I moved through the crowd, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned to see a man with piercing green eyes and a warm smile. "May I have this dance?" he asked, offering his hand. I hesitated, then nodded. "I'd like that." We moved to the dance floor, and everything else faded away. He was charming and funny, but it was the way he listened that caught me off guard. He asked about my dreams, my passions, and he genuinely seemed to care. "You're unlike anyone I've ever met," he said, his voice sincere. "I don't even know your name." I opened my mouth to answer, but before I could speak, Victoria's sharp laugh rang out from across the room. I froze. "Excuse me for a moment," I said, slipping away before she could see me. In the corner of the ballroom, Victoria was fuming. She had noticed James's attention lingering on me, or rather on the version of me that she didn't recognize. "She's nothing special," she hissed to her friend. "I'll make sure she doesn't steal my moment." Victoria's eyes locked onto the glass James had set down. With a wicked smile, she reached into her clutch, pulled out a small vial, and poured its contents into his drink. Moments later, I returned to James, but something was wrong. His charming demeanor had turned hazy, his steps unsteady. I think I need some air," he mumbled. Before I could respond, Victoria appeared at his side, feigning concern. "Come on, James. I'll help you." I watched helpless as she led him away. My heart sank. The clock struck midnight, and I realized I had to leave before Victoria uncovered my identity. I searched the ballroom for James, but he was nowhere to be found. Finally, with tears in my eyes and my heart in pieces, I stepped out into the cool night air. The evening had felt like magic, but it ended like a cruel joke. As I walked back to Mrs. Finch's house, I clutched the gown tightly, my dreams unraveling with each step. I thought I'd found something real, but it had slipped through my fingers like sand. Little did I know, the story was far from over. The morning after the ball, I woke up with a strange mix of sadness and hope. For the first time in years, I'd felt alive, seen, like I was more than just the invisible girl cleaning up after everyone else. James had seen me, talked to me, danced with me. He made me feel like I mattered. But as I walked into the kitchen to start my morning chores, my stomach turned. Gloria and Victoria's voices floated down the hall, and something about their tone made me pause. "Are you sure he believed you?" Gloria asked, her voice sharp like always. "Of course," Victoria replied, smug as ever. "He was out of it, but I made sure to drop a few details about that mystery girl he kept blabbering on about. Her favorite book, her silly little dreams of being a designer. Men are so predictable." I froze. The tray of tea I was carrying rattled in my hands. My favorite book? My dreams? How did Victoria know? "You'd better move fast," Gloria said, her voice quieter but no less cutting. "You've got him thinking you're his dream girl, but it won't last. You need to lock him down before he starts asking questions." My chest tightened as I pieced it together. Victoria had done something at the ball, something terrible, and now she was pretending to be me. I turned and bolted upstairs, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break. As I reached my room, I shut the door and sank to the floor, tears spilling down my face. A few hours later, I was back in the kitchen, forcing myself to go through the motions. Gloria had already yelled at me twice for dragging my feet, but I didn't care. My mind was spinning. Then I heard the front door open and heavy footsteps. It was him, James. I peeked out from behind the kitchen door as he walked through the house. He looked different than last night, confused, almost lost. For a split second, I thought about calling out to him, telling him everything. But then Victoria appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing one of her perfect silk robes, her hair and makeup flawless. "There you are," she cooed, descending the steps like she was floating. "I was wondering when you'd come down." James smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, sorry, my head's still a little foggy." "That's normal after a night like last night," Victoria purred, slipping her arm through his. "Come, let's have breakfast." I turned away, bile rising in my throat. She was so calm, so composed, acting like nothing was wrong while stealing the night I'd shared with him. By the time I overheard them laughing together in the dining room, I couldn't take it anymore. I ran to my room, locked the door, and buried my face in my hands. She'd taken everything, my night, my dreams, even the tiny piece of happiness I thought I could have. But as I stared out the window, the tears stopped. If Victoria thought she'd won, she was wrong. She might have fooled James for now, but I'd find a way to show him the truth. I just had to. The house was buzzing with excitement. Gloria and Victoria were in a frenzy, making sure everything was perfect for James's proposal announcement. I wasn't allowed anywhere near the main hall, of course, so I kept to the shadows, folding napkins and arranging flowers as instructed. When the guests arrived, laughter and clinking glasses filled the air. Victoria had spared no expense. There were ice sculptures, champagne towers, and an orchestra playing in the background. The kind of lavish affair only she could dream up. James stood at the center of it all, looking sharp in his tailored suit. My heart ached seeing him. He didn't seem as confident as usual, though. There was a hesitation in his movements, a shadow in his eyes. Then the moment came. James took Victoria's hand and dropped to one knee. The room erupted into cheers and applause as Victoria gasped dramatically, her hand flying to her mouth. "Yes, 1,000 times yes!" she squealed, her voice dripping with fake joy. I was frozen, watching from the edge of the room as he slid the ring onto her finger. She turned to the crowd, flashing her dazzling smile, basking in the attention. Ella's silent pain. Later, while cleaning up after the guests, I felt Victoria's presence behind me before I even heard her speak. "Did you see the ring?" she asked, holding out her hand so the diamond caught the light. "Isn't it stunning? James has such exquisite taste. He must have been thinking of me all night." I kept my head down, focusing on wiping the table. "I bet it stings, doesn't it?" she continued, her tone syrupy sweet. "Seeing someone like me get everything while you'll never have a shot." Her words hit like a punch, but I swallowed the pain, focusing on my work. I couldn't let her see how much it hurt. That night, back in my small room, I pulled out my sketchbook. The designs that had once brought me so much joy now felt like my only escape. If I couldn't speak my pain, I could at least pour it into my art. The pages filled with flowing lines and intricate patterns. I lost myself in the work, letting the pencil express what my voice couldn't. I'll find a way out of this, I whispered to myself, one way or another. A week later, while cleaning Gloria's study, I stumbled upon a flyer for a prestigious fashion competition. The winner would receive a cash prize and a scholarship to study in Paris. My heart raced as I read the details. This was it. This was my chance. I hid the flyer under my mattress and spent every free moment preparing my designs. I had to keep it a secret. If Gloria or Victoria found out, they'd ruin it. Meanwhile, James was spending more time with Victoria, and cracks in her facade were starting to show. She couldn't remember details from their magical night together, and often avoided direct questions. I swear we talked about your favorite book, James said one evening. Oh, remind me, Victoria replied, brushing it off with a laugh. James frowned, the nagging feeling in his gut growing stronger. Something didn't add up, but he didn't know what. I'll never forget the moment they called my name. And the winner of this year's Rising Designer Award is Ella Sinclair. The room erupted in applause, but for a second, all I could do was sit there in stunned silence. Then it hit me. I did it. I actually did it. The host handed me a bouquet of flowers as I made my way to the stage. My heart felt like it would burst as I looked out at the audience. All those nights sketching by candlelight, working in secret, it had finally paid off. When I reached the microphone, my hands trembled. Thank you, I began, my voice shaking. This means everything to me. Designing has always been my dream, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity. To anyone out there who feels invisible, don't give up. Your voice matters, and so does your art. The crowd applauded again, and I felt a surge of pride. This was my moment. But the moment didn't last that long. I was soon back to my miserable life. The scholarship I had won didn't start till next semester. The irony of it all wasn't lost on me. There I was, kneeling on the floor, pinning the hem of Victoria's wedding gown. A gown I designed, no less. She stood on a pedestal, preening in front of the mirror. Don't forget to take it in around the waist, Victoria said, her tone sharp. It needs to fit perfectly for my big day. James deserves to see me at my best. I bit my tongue and focused on my work. Every stitch felt like a dagger, but I couldn't stop now. The competition win had given me hope, but I needed more time before I could break free from this house entirely. Once Victoria was satisfied, she stepped out of the gown, leaving it draped on the mannequin. I'll be back later to try it on again, she said, walking out with her usual air of superiority. The house grew quiet. I stood there staring at the gown. My hands itched to fix the final details, to make it perfect, not for Victoria, but for myself. On a whim, I slipped the dress on. The fabric hugged my body like it was made for me, which of course it was. Standing in front of the mirror, I almost didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. The sound of the door opening pulled me out of my thoughts. I turned, startled, to see James standing in the doorway. His eyes widened as they took me in, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. Ella, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. I froze, unsure of what to do. It's you, he continued, stepping closer. You're the woman from the ball. I shook my head, my pulse racing. James, I can explain. But he wasn't listening. His eyes were locked on me, his expression a mix of shock and dawning realization. I remember now. The way you talked about designing, the way you laughed, it was you all along. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I forced myself to stay composed. James, there's something you need to know. I stepped out of the dress, draping it carefully over the mannequin, and faced him. Victoria lied to you, I said, my voice steady. She wasn't the one you met that night. I was. She spiked your drink and made you think you spent the night with her. James stared at me, his face pale. What? She wanted you for herself, James. She was jealous. She knew we connected, and she couldn't stand it. So she sabotaged us. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the room. This can't be true. Victoria, she said She said whatever she needed to keep you. I cut in. She's been lying to you from the start. James stopped pacing and looked at me, his eyes filled with regret. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Would you have believed me? I asked, crossing my arms. You were so convinced Victoria was the one. I thought it was better to stay quiet. He sank into a nearby chair, his head in his hands. I can't believe I let this happen. I can't believe I let her fool me. I softened, stepping closer. James, you didn't know. But now you do. The question is, what are you going to do about it? He looked up at me, determination replacing the regret in his eyes. I'm going to make this right. I promise Ella. I won't let her get away with this. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to hope that justice might finally be within reach. The grand ballroom was packed. Rows of lavishly dressed guests sipped champagne and admired the extravagant floral arrangements. Victoria had spared no expense, eager to show the world her victory. I stood at the edge of the room, my heart pounding. I wasn't supposed to be here, but James had insisted. You deserve to see this. He'd said, it's your truth. Victoria floated down the aisle, her gown trailing behind her like a river of white satin. She beamed at the crowd, basking in their admiration. James stood at the altar, his expression unreadable. When Victoria reached him, she gave him a dazzling smile. Ready to make me Mrs. Carlton? She whispered. James didn't respond. Instead, he stepped back, his gaze steady. The room fell silent as he addressed the crowd. Before we begin, I have something to say, James announced, his voice carrying through the room. Victoria's smile faltered. James, what are you doing? He turned to her, his tone sharp. Telling the truth. I stepped forward, clutching the folder containing my sketches and Victoria's written confession. Every step felt like a battle, but I held my head high. What's she doing here? Victoria hissed, her voice a mix of panic and anger. James ignored her and gestured for me to speak. Victoria has lied to all of you, I began, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. She wasn't the woman James met at the masquerade ball. I was. Gasps rippled through the room. I opened the folder and held up one of my sketches. These are the designs I shared with James the night of the ball. He recognized them when he saw them again. Victoria couldn't have drawn them because they're mine. Victoria's face turned red. She's lying. She's just jealous. Am I? I cut her off. You spiked his drink, Victoria. You admitted it yourself. I held up a handwritten note, a confession Victoria had made to Gloria, mocking me. I found this in your room. You thought you could destroy the evidence, but you didn't? James stepped forward, his voice cold. She told me everything, Victoria. You manipulated me. You used me. And you thought you could get away with it. Victoria's polished veneer cracked. I didn't mean to. James, please. I love you. You love what I could give you? James shot back. Not me. The guests murmured, their admiration turning to disdain. One by one, they turned their backs on her, their whispers sharp and unforgiving. Gloria tried to intervene, stepping forward with a fake smile. This is all a misunderstanding. It's not, James interrupted. And your schemes are over too, Gloria. As the room erupted in whispers and judgment, Victoria collapsed into a chair, her tears staining her perfect makeup. I stood back, watching as the world she'd built on lies came crashing down. For the first time, I felt free. The truth was out, and the power was finally mine. The room was a storm of whispers and gasps, faces turning away from Victoria as if she carried a disease. For someone who thrived on admiration, the disdain in the air was unbearable. She stood frozen at the center of it all, clutching her gown like a lifeline, her once dazzling confidence reduced to desperate panic. James, please! Victoria's voice cracked, her words almost drowned out by the murmurs. You can't believe her. Enough, Victoria, James said firmly, cutting her off. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried enough weight to silence the room. You lied to me. You took advantage of me, and now everyone knows. Victoria's hands trembled as she reached for him, but James took a step back. That single motion shattered whatever shred of control she thought she had left. "I can explain," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way. Victoria," James said coldly, his expression hard as stone. "I don't want to hear it." As the weight of James's rejection settled, Victoria turned to the crowd. These were her people, her social circle, her admirers, the ones who'd envied her for years. But their expressions now ranged from pity to disgust. "Can you believe this?" someone whispered from the back. "She drugged him at a party?" another voice hissed. Victoria's head snapped toward the voices, her face burning with humiliation. "No, it's not true. They're lying." But no one was listening. Instead, they were looking at her with judgment in their eyes. A couple of women in designer dresses turned their backs, whispering to each other as they walked out of the room. Men who had once flirted with her openly now avoided her gaze entirely. Gloria, who had been lingering at the edge of the chaos, tried to step in, plastering on a brittle smile. "This is all just a misunderstanding," Gloria said, her tone dripping with false charm. "Victoria's always been a little dramatic, but—" "Enough!" James barked, glaring at her. "You've both played your games for too long. It's over." Gloria faltered, her mask slipping. "James, surely you can't—" "I don't want to hear it," he snapped. "Your schemes for wealth, for power, it's all over. You'll never manipulate anyone in this town again." Gloria's face twisted with anger as the guests began murmuring again, their judgments extending to her now. Victoria sank into a chair, her head in her hands. She couldn't even look up as the room emptied out, her social circle abandoning her one by one. Gloria pulled her daughter to her feet, but Victoria pushed her away. "Leave me alone, mother," she hissed, tears streaming down her face. As I stood there, watching them crumble, I felt a strange sense of peace. They'd built their lives on lies and manipulation, and now it had all come crashing down. Victoria looked at me one last time, her eyes filled with rage and defeat. But I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The truth had spoken for itself. I stood in front of the house, my house, the one I grew up in. It looked a little worn from neglect, but it was still standing. The shutters, once a bright green, had faded and peeled. The garden was overgrown with weeds, but even that felt comforting in its way. It was a piece of my father that I'd finally gotten back. Victoria and Gloria hadn't been able to face the fallout of their lies and scheming. After the wedding disaster, the entire social circle they had worked so hard to impress turned on them. Invitations dried up, friendships evaporated, and whispers followed them everywhere. Within weeks, they sold off whatever they could and fled the country, disappearing like a bad dream. When they left, they hadn't even bothered to try and sell the house. I guess the shame was too much for them to handle. It didn't matter. I'd made sure the property was legally transferred back to me. Now it was mine, free and clear. The months after everything unraveled for Gloria and Victoria had been transformative. Winning the fashion competition wasn't just a career milestone. It was the start of a new chapter. My designs became sought after, and my story of resilience resonated with people. Clients lined up not just for my work, but for what it represented: strength, creativity, and survival. I threw myself into my work, sketching and sewing until late into the night. Orders poured in, collaborations with established designers came calling, and I even landed a feature in a major fashion magazine. For the first time, my talent was enough. I didn't need approval from people who looked down on me. When I opened the doors to my very own studio, a bright, inspiring space filled with fabrics and sketches, I felt a kind of joy I hadn't experienced in years. Everything I had dreamed of was finally happening. The house wasn't just a property to me, it was a symbol of my journey. Walking through its halls, I could almost hear my father's laughter, feel his warm encouragement. In the attic where I used to sew secretly, I stood quietly for a moment and whispered, "I did it, Dad. I'm home." I spent days restoring the house, scrubbing floors, painting walls, and clearing out the overgrown garden. Every small change felt like taking another piece of my life back. One evening, as I finished setting up a small design space in the dining room, there was a knock on the door. When I opened it, James was standing there, looking nervous and holding a bouquet of wildflowers. They were a little wilted, but the gesture felt genuine. "Can I come in?" he asked softly. I nodded, stepping aside. I've been thinking a lot, he began as we sat down. I messed up, Ella. I let myself be fooled, and I hurt you. You deserved so much better than what I gave you. His voice was steady, but I could see the regret in his eyes. I'm sorry for not seeing you sooner, for not recognizing who you were. I took a deep breath. James, I've learned a lot these past months too. I've learned to let go of the things and people that don't add to my life, but I also see that you've changed, and that's something I respect. We sat on the porch steps, talking late into the night. It wasn't a grand romantic gesture, but it was honest and it was real. James wasn't perfect, but neither was I. What mattered was that we were stepping into something new, built on truth and mutual respect. As we watched the sun set over the horizon, James reached for my hand. This time, I didn't pull away. This was my new beginning, my house, my career, my choices, and someone by my side who saw me for who I was. And as I looked out at the garden, imagining it full of life again, I smiled. They tried to break me, I said softly, but all they did was make me stronger. The late afternoon sunlight poured into the studio, casting a golden glow over the scattered fabrics and sketches. I sat at my workbench, running my fingers over the delicate embroidery of a dress I'd just finished. It wasn't for a client. It was just for me. A creation I dreamed up on a quiet evening. A reflection of how far I'd come. As I sat there, the memories of my journey flowed through my mind like a film reel. The years of humiliation and heartbreak, of sacrificing my dreams for others who never saw my worth. The sharp sting of betrayal still lingered if I thought too hard about it, but it no longer defined me. I wasn't that forgotten girl anymore. I'd built something beautiful out of the wreckage. I had reclaimed my father's home, built a name for myself in the fashion world, and found my voice. For the first time, I felt whole, and the pain that had once consumed me, it was no longer my burden. I'd forgiven myself for holding on to it for so long. The soft knock at the door startled me from my thoughts. I turned to see James standing there, holding a small velvet box in his hand. His expression was a mixture of nerves and hope, and for a moment I couldn't help but smile. James? I asked, rising from my chair. He stepped closer, his hands trembling slightly as he opened the box. Inside was a delicate ring, its simplicity matching everything I'd ever dreamed of. I've thought about this moment for weeks, he said softly, about the right words, the perfect setting. But standing here, I realize it's not about perfection. It's about honesty. He took a deep breath, his gaze steady. Ella, you are the most extraordinary person I've ever known. I didn't see you for who you were before, but now, I see everything. Your strength, your kindness, your brilliance. I don't want to miss another moment of it. My heart swelled as he knelt down. Will you marry me? Tears filled my eyes, and for a brief second, I hesitated. Not out of doubt, but because the weight of everything that had brought me here hit me all at once. Then, I nodded, a wide smile breaking across my face. Yes, James, I said, my voice trembling. I will. The church was quiet, the air filled with the faint scent of roses and lilies. I stood at the entrance, wearing the gown I'd spent months designing. It was a reflection of me, elegant, strong, and uniquely mine. As the music began, I stepped forward, my heart calm and steady. When I reached James at the altar, his eyes were filled with the same unwavering warmth I'd come to trust. As we exchanged vows, I knew this wasn't just the beginning of a marriage. It was the start of a partnership built on respect and love. Walking back down the aisle, hand in hand with James, I smiled. For the first time, my happiness wasn't tied to anyone else's approval. It was mine, and it was real.